I always like to go back to basics and talk about what we're talking about and remind of the big concept. So the word brand itself comes from the Old Norse, the old Scandinavian word for fire, which is why if you go to Stockholm, where I took this photograph, you see outside the fire stations lamps that say brand station. And it evolved from there into this idea of a mark, of something you stamp your property, your livestock with as a sign of ownership, as a sign of possession, and a communication, a symbol to others that this belongs to somebody. But I think in modern times, a more interesting, a more useful way of thinking about brand is to recognize that to be branded means to be known, to be regarded, to be appreciated, to be understood, valued, trusted, liked, loved even, and identified with. The strongest brands are the ones that people identify with. In the realm of places, I think the gold standard of brands is New York City. I don't think there's anyone over the age of 4 years old in the world that hasn't at least got brand awareness of New York City. I don't think I've ever met anyone who didn't at least want to visit the place. So that's sort of, yeah. Place branding as an activity, there's a lot of talk, a lot of jargon, a lot of nonsense about it. I think that although it's rarely expressed so tersely, the ultimate purpose of any place branding activity is simple and threefold. It's for the place to become better understood in various facets and more attractive to or appreciated or trusted by more people. When we say that France has a stronger brand than Paraguay, all we really mean by that is that if I say, tell me some things about France, you can rattle off some associations for a minute or two, and if I say, tell me about Paraguay, you run out of things to say probably before you get started. You just know more about Paris and more associations, stronger brand. It's a lot simpler than we sometimes make it to be, and when we make it too complicated, we lose track of what we're trying to do. Once on the back of a napkin, much like the Laffer curve, as I used to be an economist, I drew a basic model, the simplest model I could think of brand strength, which has fame on one axis and love on the other. And I think you can map just about any brand to this. If you take a brand like Coca-Cola, I think that's a strong brand because it's very famous, not particularly because it's well loved. I mean, people do not line up around the block when a new flavor of Coca-Cola comes out. They buy Coke, it's a strong brand. I'm not knocking Coke, but I don't think it's particularly well loved. I think the same is true of McDonald's. If you're over the age of 8, you value McDonald's, but you no longer, it doesn't occupy a big place in your heart. And then there are brands like Apple that for a long time were just loved. They weren't particularly popular, and then they became more famous and moved to the outer horizon of the implied curve there. So when you sit down to work on a brand, you can think very simply, what's more, we probably need to do both or could do both, but what's the more important one? What's the one to attack first? Love would be about getting people to more strongly identify with you, and fame would be about getting more people to know you in more and more ways. And you do both of these things with different emphasis by becoming better, sexier, and more relevant, and then drawing attention to yourself. Always worth pointing out that when we use the word brand, we use it in two different ways. Both perfectly reasonable, but it's good to remember what we're talking about. So when we say brand, sometimes we mean brand identity, or with more clarity, corporate identity, which would be, logo, color scheme, website, and so on. Or in the case of a place, architecture, streetscape, signage, hard attributes or features of the place. And then on the other hand, when we say brand, sometimes we mean brand image. In other words, what people have in their heads or the impressions that you're making. That's really important to go back to, because it seems by the way people, by the managers of place brands, that what they think they can do is declare through advertising and other forms of paid-for communications, just come to wherever, invest in wherever, be interested in wherever, because we say so. And then you get some very bizarre things, like this is the most bizarre place advertisement I've ever seen. It was in a magazine, in the seat back of a British Midlands flight from London to Belfast, which is already odd, I think, but welcome to Kyrgyzstan, land of Santa Claus. It makes no sense. There's a reason behind it to do with logistics, but basically Hemingway said that writing is easy until you think about the reader. Apparently it's true about place communications as well. And you have place communications equivalent that are to these wind farm ads. All energy companies are apparently obligated to show wind farms in all of their communications, but it's not wrong. It's just useless. That doesn't shoulder any weight. That doesn't change anyone's perceptions. It doesn't do anything. It's a waste of money and time, and a little bit patronizing. So it's probably actually counterproductive, but it's certainly not productive in helping change the image or reputation of a place. Earlier this year, the Reputation Institute, so-called, put out a ranking of the world's most reputable countries based on the level of trust, admiration, respect, and affinity respondents felt toward them. I highlight those words. I didn't even look at the survey, except to note that Canada turned out to be the world's most reputable country. But this deconstructing the word reputation, trust, admiration, respect, affinity, these are the things that you're going for as a place. And if you notice something about these concepts, it's that these are not really things that you can talk people into. You can't just ask people to have these things. You need to somehow earn this stuff, cajole it from people. It's not simply earning it, it's talking about it as well. But what do you do? What do you do to get these things? There are at the moment about 6 place branding techniques that I most believe in. And I feel, as a place branding consultant, a little like the former house burglar who becomes a security consultant. I mean, I spent many years selling logos and slogans to places, and through doing that, I learned the limitations of that, and I've seen the light, and I'm now doing different types of activity toward the same supposed ends. So direct advertising that draws visitors, I do think is valid, but it's not because it's the communications themselves that build the brand. It's because visitors build the brand. Word of mouth, one of the previous speakers mentioned, is a way that people, that's a communication vector that works. And when people visit a place, they feel closer to it. This is studied and understood. So getting people to go to a place is important, and a legitimate brand building technique. Tactical communications, which credibly convey maybe one thing about a place, just like advertising a distinctive feature or benefit of a product. You can do that legitimately about a place. Just communicate something that you want people to know and that you think they'd be interested in knowing. I'm a big fan these days of piggybacking communications. When a place is in the news, or when you find something about a place that you can sort of promote by itself and bring the place along with it. I'll give an example shortly. Policy changes are a huge thing because they're real and they're newsworthy, or can be. You can't really fake that. I'll get more into unfakeable signals in a minute. And then dramatic or symbolic actions, because they're real and newsworthy as well. And one of my favorites, place of origin labeling. When I saw the pictures of the boats in, what's the name of that? It's where they had the boats made like furniture. It made me think that exports are kind of like a souvenir of a place. When you buy something from a faraway place that maybe you've never been to, it's a little like a kind of remote tourism. You can conceptually. So I think place of origin labeling is a huge thing to do. So I started a company earlier this year called Thrilling Cities, based in Shanghai and London, and rather ambitiously we regard ourselves as rebranding the world and rebranding branding. Indeed, we believe the most effective way to deal with the brands of places is to make the places sexier in reality and in the way they're projected. And we produce promotional films for cities, and we provide creative direction for innovative municipal policies and aesthetically relevant infrastructure improvements. So if a city is building a metro system, we'll try to make sure they get a metro system that somehow expresses or reflects or embodies something about that city, or can be that's not a metro system that could be anywhere. And half the world's GDP comes from a mere handful of cities, and so you know these statistics, and so cities are the dominant life form of the 21st century for sure, and so we emphasize them, but we also work for do branding projects for property developments and corporations, national governments and events. So let me give you an example of just a couple of these, not all 6, but an example of a tactical communication we did for the Shanghai Tourist Authority. I don't know if this video will actually play. It doesn't much matter. The idea here is that Shanghai's growth is so phenomenal that people lose track. A surprising number of people still think that Shanghai is a kind of a backwater. They don't realize that it's like New York of if not Asia, if not the world, Asia. And so this was a simple communication tool just to use time-lapse photography to make Shanghai look like New York. That was very simple. Didn't ask it to do a lot. The video is called This is Shanghai. You can find it on all of the video hosting. I've been working in a city called Vilnius, Lithuania, which is in Northern Europe. It's the capital of a country of about 3.5 million people. It's about 500,000 people in the city, so it's something like Copenhagen, Oslo, in that neighborhood. But it's not very prominent. It's not very well known. It's a very charming place. It's a lovely little city, and we were looking for ways to make a bigger deal out of Vilnius, make people more aware of more things and like Vilnius more. And we ran across these gymnasts. So they're these street gymnasts who run around town doing pull-ups on strange things and just demonstrating rather remarkable feats of strength. And they're guys from Vilnius, and they had some videos that went kind of viral on the web, but they just shot them with their phones, and they shot them in the yards behind these Soviet buildings, and it made Lithuania, which is almost a first world Western European country now, look like Chechnya or Ukraine or Russia or something. It didn't look good, didn't make the place look good at all. So we said, look, why don't we take these guys and show them, use the city as a backdrop, let the city be a playground for them, and show them jumping around in the streets. And we shot some video a couple of weeks ago, which I'm not going to get to show you, which isn't online yet, so you can't see it. But it shows from this first frame, you get a sense of the charm of the city. It's the only capital city in Europe that allows balloons to fly over the city. So many times of the day throughout the year, there's balloons over the. I mean, it's a neat place and kind of quirky, and we show that. But the video is just these guys running around the city. We name check Vilnius a few times so people don't forget that. But it's a video about them that carries Vilnius with it. That's the piggybacking type thing. Now, policy changes. Sometimes these you can make a big statement with very little or almost no budget expenditure at all. So I remembered somehow in the back of my mind that Tijuca Forest in Rio is the so-called largest urban forest in the world. They make that claim gets reported over and over again. So I looked it up, and it's 32 square kilometers in size. Now Vilnius, which is 4 times the size of Paris in area, and is 1/3 covered with trees. If you do the math, actually has the largest urban forest in the world. It's just not designated that way, and they haven't made a big deal out of it. So with a few phone calls and some minor league coordination, we're going to set it up so that you soon see a headline through this symbolic action. Vilnius overtakes Rio de Janeiro as home to the largest urban forest in the world. And this they're going to get basically for free. I mean, there's no expense to doing this. It's just some moving things on a ledger. And this will have positioning power to make the city a cheerleader for the country. It's a good thing to do. It's a freebie as well. And they're going to probably earn some bonus points by putting Wi-Fi in the forest. They have some of the fastest internet in the world. They're like second behind Korea or something silly like that, like stupid fast internet there. And they might as well, find a platform for making that known. Where better to put it than in the forest? Brands from places. Hello, brand, where are you from? People like things to be from somewhere these days. It helps them get a handle on the thing, helps them understand stuff. They like it a lot, actually. And some places, the place of origin, the brand of the place of origin is so strong that the product brand just shows up and doesn't even talk about the product. They just say, like, here's a fancy German appliance company, just says, we're German, buy us. Mentions nothing about the product. Anything German engineering works. If you ask any American over a certain age about Farfignugan, he or she will laugh because there were ad campaigns for years using this German word in an English language television ad. It means driving pleasure, and Volkswagen used that for many years. Bizarre things happen though with these kinds of provenance claims. You get France, a French car company, and it's not like France doesn't have an engineering heritage, right? I mean, this is not a country unknown, or known for being bereft of engineering prowess, and yet they didn't have enough confidence in this Citroën to call it a French car. They had to point out that it was unmistakably German, and there were wacky ads with Wagner music playing. Haagen-Dazs is a great example of fun and games with place of origin. It was invented in New York City by, I think, an Italian couple in their kitchen, and they gave it this Scandinavian name because they thought it made it sound exotic and expensive. That letter A there's a couple of Swedes in the room, I think. That letter A with 2 dots does not even exist in Scandinavian alphabets. They not only made up a name, they made up letters. That's the extent that they took it. Or Massimo Dutti, which appears to be an Italian brand, is and always has been a Spanish brand. It just originated at a time before Spain had the self-confidence to go out into the world proclaiming Spanishness, and so they ended up, they were faking it. Times have changed. Now you have Mango not only going out as Spanish, but doing a signed, inking an agreement with the city of Barcelona to do a brand tie-in and promote themselves as Barcelona origin. And I think you'll see more of that, not just country of origin, but city of origin, as cities are the dominant life form of the 21st century. Another great example, Matsui, is, I don't think this brand exists anymore, but it was marketed in Britain as Japanese technology made perfect. It's 100% British with components from Taiwan, South Korea, Malaysia, and at the time Yugoslavia. Comme des Garçons masquerades as French, but is 100% Japanese. The USA, my home country, once upon a time, now used to have a more solidly positive image. I think that positive image is still there, but it's now cluttered with other things, whether it's warlike activities or just gluttony. And so companies that would otherwise stamp their products made in USA are looking for alternatives. The best one is on the back of any Apple device, it says designed by Apple in California, assembled in China. So it hits all the legal requirements, and the origins are conveyed in the proportion that the customer appreciates. I mean, one of the best things for Brazil that will happen is when they finally get around to making iPads there, it'll say designed by Apple in California, assembled in Brazil, and that will be better than all of the money that the Brazilian national government could spend on promoting the country in terms of conveying desirable traits about the place. So the apparent lesson here is to use your place of origin if you think it helps, and hide it or lie about it if you think that it doesn't. But in fact, I believe that clever branding can make a virtue of place of origin even when that seems impossible. A few years ago, the agency I was working for was approached by Apollo Tires, which was the #2 tire company in India. And they were wanting to enter the European market, starting in Germany. They were willing to downplay their Indian origins and take a discount on the price. They were going to be selling to taxi fleets and trucks and B2B, so it wasn't going to be a Michelin so much as riding on your tires kind of emotional appeal anyway. They were selling to people who were interested in the bottom line, but they still wanted to downplay their Indian origins. And I didn't like this. This didn't sit well with me. I thought, first of all, there's a lot of brand equity in India. There's bound to be some associations that might be useful. And anyway, I believe in my heart of hearts that brands and people should be in some way proud of where they're from. And I thought there's got to be some useful stereotype, something that people know about India in Germany that can be leveraged for Apollo Tires. And I thought, well, if you close your eyes and you think about what are the images you've got of India that relate to tires, it's something like this. So why not, I proposed, come out with the claim, Apollo's tires are made for the worst roads and the worst drivers on planet Earth. They're definitely good enough for a German taxi. And they were stunned by this, the executives of Apollo Tires. They did not really know how to respond right away, but eventually they came round to it, and they embraced their Indianness, and they adopted an Indian color palette in their new corporate identity. And a slogan where the Silk Road meets the Autobahn. And they went forth with that, and they're now, they've done pretty well. So my advice to countries, and maybe even products, different audiences, is to label the exports in a way that characterizes the country, the place, authentically, even mythologizes it, and teaches people something about where this product that presumably they like comes from. Chile makes wine. There's a lot of Chilean wine sold in Europe. This is a bottle I had once, Isla Negra, and it says on the back that Isla Negra is a seaside village famous for artists and writers who come to be inspired, blah, 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 blah. I said, whoa, hang on a minute. They're missing a huge opportunity here, because Isla Negra it's not just writers and artists. Pablo Neruda is famous for being from Isla Negra and living in Isla Negra. Pablo Neruda is a world-famous poet who won the Nobel Prize for Literature and is Chilean, but they don't mention that, but they could, so why not put on the bottle, because they have the space for it, made in Chile, called The Thin Country, by Nobel Prize-winning Chilean poet Pablo Neruda. It's free advertising, that they just miss that. Ecuador is doing a thing with whether they export 40 million zillion bananas every year, and they're now putting stickers on the bananas with a code or a URL to get people to be interested in tourism to Ecuador. Again, that's really cheap. How much are stickers, right? And Ecuador is a nice place to visit, but it doesn't have a tourism budget, so nothing that would get in front of 40 million people. So I believe strongly that the place of origin is the hidden brand asset of the 21st century, and that exports should be labeled creatively to make made in international advertising space, and that brands can, in their own interests, should be proud international ambassadors. I believe this so much that I spent 6 months out of the last 2 years in Mongolia. Mongolia produces about 40% of the world's cashmere. China produces 50%. So there are two major cashmere producers. Mongolia is one of them. it's really the epitome of the faraway exotic place. You know, it's kind of discovered by Marco Polo. It's the land of Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire, the second largest empire in the history of the world after the British, and the largest contiguous land empire ever. A very, you know, romantic sort of a place. And 2/3, on top of that, the way people live there, 2/3 of Mongolians are nomadic herders, and they live this very, very unique and vulnerable life that's worthy of preservation and defense, and makes a great brand story. It's much more interesting. It's the equivalent of free-range chicken versus farm chickens. In China, all of the cashmere goats are in pens. They're in corrals. They're on farms. In Mongolia, they're all out on the range like this, on the steppe in the Gobi Desert. And then the impetus for this was that at market, Mongolia was just not getting enough credit for its role in all of this. Stuff was getting rebranded, you know, as Italian cashmere. There are no cashmere goats in Italy to speak of. This garment would have been spun. The yarn was probably made in Italy, and the garment might have been knitted. No, then the yarn was sent. You can read the labels. Then the yarn was sent back to China, and it was knitted in China, and then it was sold by J.Crew, which plasters New York all over the label. So Mongolia is nowhere in this, and that's just wrong. So I spent 6 months there, hanging out with the camels, getting tick-bite fever, enduring -20 temperature, but it was a good time. I had my team of locals and foreigners, and we did a series of initiatives over time. So first we devised a competitive strategy to take account of the strengths and weaknesses of Mongolia as a cashmere producer. I won't get into that, but they have some weaknesses, and we need to figure out what made sense for them. And we created a labeling and certification system with very beautiful, if I do say so myself, and what we call world-class Mongolian brand identity, which I'll show you. And we developed feature products that would showcase this new branding. And we coached Mongolian companies to develop their own branding capabilities and understanding, and we coordinated co-branding ventures with established Western brands who agreed to feature Mongolian origin. So the main strategy is like an ingredient brand, like you have Intel inside, and it's right here on this machine in front of me. We wanted to do something like Mongolia inside, so an Italian company, any company could make they wouldn't step on anyone's toes. No matter who was making the garment and where they were making it, they could still identify Mongolia inside. And the design brief was that the labeling should help make the garment into an object of desire, and should be world-class and Mongolian. It should be something that a posh Italian brand would be willing to stick on as a label. So I got Mongolia's greatest living calligrapher to draw the brand mark, and then hired a Danish design studio to make it into an identity system. And the mark, we call it Certified Mongolian Noble Fiber, and the mark is actually a word. It's the word Khan, which is king, Genghis Khan, that kind of thing, so it fits with noble. And Mongolians of a certain age who studied their own script can actually look at that, they can read that, that's a word. But it's just a neat kind of simultaneously undulating and static symbol, and people just react well to it. They're like, whoa, what's that? It doesn't look Arabic, it doesn't look Chinese, what's going on here? Oh, Mongolian. And we focused on one of the virtues that they've got, which is undyed and unbleached. Most of the goats in China are white. If you want a pink sweater, make it out of Chinese cashmere, because the Mongolian stuff is brown and beige. But it's beautiful in natural colors. We created flagship products like this Mongolian beach blanket, we called it, which a company in California used and photographed on Malibu Beach. And then we did identity work with particular Mongolian companies to help them be more Mongolian. This company was just called Bodios before I got my hands on them, and I said, call yourselves Bodios of Mongolia. And they said, sure. And that's Bodio, and we featured Bodio, who grew up with the herders, and we made a story out of this that no Chinese company could possibly make, because it would be an outright lie. So we did a kind of judo move against, for this country of 3 million, against their neighbor of 1 billion, to help them compete. in cashmere. I even inadvisedly modeled for the catalog because we wanted to have the first catalog that had sort of mixed ethnic people in it. Mongolian catalogs always had Mongolians only. So we mixed it up and we let them use the brand mark in promoting themselves. And then we made inroads. We didn't quite get there before the time ran out on the project, but we made inroads with with Patagonia in particular, who are very interested in traceability and knowing where every fiber comes from and tracing it to a particular herder in a particular province in a particular town. And came very close to getting them to move their production from China to Mongolia and to feature in all of their stores and all of their products made out of cashmere this Mongolian origin. So the results were a powerful new brand platform for reintroducing the best of Mongolian exotic fiber to the world market, and a clear and strong strategy that's coherent and supportive of larger national goals like the sustainable development of Mongolia's nomadic culture and the diversification of Mongolia's economy, which is totally reliant on mining otherwise. Now I'll close with just a food for thought. Something's been on my mind lately. The concept of unfakeable signals, or honest signals, which comes from nature, like many good ideas do. So in evolutionary biology, an honest signal is an unfakeable communication of fitness. So if a springbok, this deer-like thing, can jump like this, it will do that. Because that says to a lion, don't even try to catch me, you can't do it. So if you can jump like that, you do it, and then the lion goes, all right, never mind. That's an unfakeable signal. Men taking physical risks in the human realm as being attractive to women, this is also an unfakeable signal. It says, I do this and yet I'm still alive, which proves I'm brave and competent. If you win the Monaco F1, you've won the Monaco F1. You can't, that's not a pretend achievement. The only way to do that is to actually do it. So the point here is that the best branding of places and otherwise often involves the deliberate construction of honest signals. And that the less pretending you do, the better your marketing and branding will be. Thank you.